afternoon, everyone. My name is Chantel Bivens, and I'm the Special Consultant to the Vice President of Student Affairs. Today's Student Union Noon Forum event is the second series in 4 for this school year. The purpose of the Noon Forum is to provide an opportunity for CI students to engage in diverse perspectives and to learn about current social justice issues that influence the CI community and the public at large. The Noon Forums are not meant to exclude anyone, but to rather encourage a safe environment and place for discussion to expand student perspectives.
So we are here today to learn about the experience of our Dreamer students. We understand that people have different perspectives and stances on this, and so this conversation may be uncomfortable or new for some of you. Please keep in mind that this is not a bad thing. Woo. Because these discussions can help increase our comfort level with important social justice issues. For this reason, we ask that throughout the event you please be respectful and listen so that way we can learn from you and some new information from new perspectives. It is our hope that when you leave here today, you take with you an increased understanding of current social justice issues and how they influence the CI community, as well as a deeper understanding of what you can do to create change here on campus as well as within your communities.
At this time, we would like to introduce our student panelists to share with us what life is like as an undocumented student. In addition to our student panelists, we have also included a professional expert to share information and facts pertaining to the laws and resources available to Dreamer students. Please hold all questions until the end at the question and answer portion.
So we have Miriam Ramirez here, who is a senior majoring in liberal studies with an emphasis in bilingual authorization. She also has a minor in Chicano studies and is first generation college student that will be graduating this spring.
Next, we have Erica Landa, who is a third-year student majoring in Chicano studies.
And then we have Monica Rivas, who is the Assistant Director of Advising, Special Populations Coordination here at CI. She currently serves as the AB 540 Task Force and was part of the initial group that helped create the AB 540's training that took place here for faculty and staff members. Over the past 2 to 3 years, Monica has provided Spanish presentations to migrant parents about AB 540 and related legislation and services available to students. Working in an advising office, students can feel safe to come to Monica as an ally who will do what she can to advise them and then provide them with information about resources and support. Okay, so now let's open it up to our panelists. Our first question, as I mentioned, is from Monica. Can you please tell us what the term dreamers means?
So the term dreamer, originally it has a double meaning. Originally, and before I can actually explain the term dreamer, I have to kind of go back and explain some of the legislation like AB 540. The dreamers are, basically undocumented youth who, in most cases, have been in the United States for most of their lives. They just weren't born here and do not have legal status. And once it became time for them to apply for colleges, they realized they actually didn't have Social Security numbers. They realized they actually didn't have legal documentation. And previously, if they wanted to go on to college, they had to pay, because they didn't have resident status, they had to pay out-of-state tuition. And like currently, the CSU tuition is roughly $3,500. A student who pays out-of-state tuition had to pay roughly $7,500. So before, you had students who pretty much attended public education most of their lives, and but they had to pay out-of-state tuition. So in approximately 2001, they created AB 540 legislation, which allowed students who had been attending public schools in California to be able to pay in-state tuition. And so they had to be, have graduated from a public high school and have attended at least 3 years or have the equivalent of a GED, and they would be able to qualify for in-state tuition. Now, over the last several years, there's been a lot of legislation out there in regards to trying to provide funds for these students. And so one of the bills that they were proposing was the Development Relief and Education for Minority Act. So that's where the acronym DREAM came about. And it was pretty much not accepted for years and years. And there was finally a version of the bill that was finally approved. But, so with the acronym, so getting back to the original question of what is a dreamer, so, it's a student who, basically using the acronym of DREAM, has dreams and aspirations to be able to plan and hope for, to be able to get a college degree and a better hope for their future. So with the legislation that was passed for, most notably in 2012, before, in 2001 with the AB 540 legislation, they were able to just qualify to have in-state tuition versus out-of-state, but they, still had to pay, monies out of pocket. But with the recent changes with the DREAM Act, they are now able to qualify for certain grants like the Cal Grant and fee waivers for community colleges and private scholarships. So that is, something that's been a recent change, and so that is only, but that's currently just for California.
Monica, can you please explain DACA and how what that means and how it's different from the DREAM Act?
Yes. So DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and this was something that President Obama signed into legislation. And what it allowed, and just to kind of explain, I've been here at CI now for almost 9 years in January, working as an advisor, and in that time I have come across different Dreamer students. These students worked, 2 jobs and took a full-time load just to be able to pay for the education. I also had students who had to take the bus. One student took the bus from Santa Barbara or Goleta, took him 3 or 4 hours each way to come here, or they were local residents and had to take the bus. And so it restricted they couldn't take any evening classes. So with the passing of DACA, really improved things for students, because now they are able to apply for, a California driver license. So they are no longer restricted for the bus. And they can also apply for a social security number. And so there are some restrictions as far as who qualifies for this. So it has to be someone who came to the United States prior to the age of 16. They have to have had continuous enrollment, continuous residency in the United States for 5 years, and this was prior to June 15th of 2012. And they needed to have graduated from high school, obtained a GED, or have been dishonorably discharged veteran of the Coast Guard or other armed services. And they also have to be someone who hasn't been convicted of a felony or have any misdemeanors or pose a threat to national security, and also someone who is not above the age of age 30. So there are some restrictions with that. And in even more recent years, and this is just, again, there's always new legislation that comes upon, but starting 2016, now another thing that is new is that through SB 1150, that now prohibits the Department of Consumer Affairs from denying applicants a professional or vocational license for lack of immigration status. So that just kind of opens more doors. So that is, a good thing. And then also something that's fairly new is that now students can apply for the California Dream Loan Program through the UCs and CSUs.
Thank you. Another question is, what resources do Dreamer students have here specifically at CI?
So specifically at CI, so one thing that students can, do is apply for, if they meet the qualifications for, the DREAM Act, they can apply for the California DREAM Act application, and there is a designated financial aid counselor for Dreamer students. They can also inquire on any private loans that may be available. And another thing too is that we have a student support services program, the Education Opportunity Program. So that you can only apply as a freshman for that program. In addition to that, as was mentioned before, our campus has started doing trainings for faculty and staff on AB 540 training. And so if you walk around campus and you see offices that have a golden key on their door, that means that it's someone who's an ally, and it means that someone who has received some kind of training. We're not like experts on legal documents that may need to be filled out and whatnot, but we can at least be a resource, a network of people that if you ask specific questions as far as what potential private scholarships or potential community resources might be available to you, we know who we can call or how we can get that information. And for anybody who is interested, whether you're a student, faculty, or staff, there will be another meeting training on March 4th. So I'm sure that the university will talk more about that next semester.
Thank you. Now we would like to ask our students. Erica, what was your experience like as a Dreamer applying to college, and what challenges did you face as a Dreamer student?
Hi everybody, my name is Erica Langa, like they were saying. I was in AVID, Advanced Placement for high school, which shows you how to get to graduation. I was in AVID since I was a 7th grader up until my senior year in high school. And in AVID, as many of you might know, they tell you, to get involved in clubs, to have really good grades, to be in honor classes, to be in advanced placement classes, and you'll be able to get to college, right? Being a part of AVID, I learned a lot about colleges, and my dream school was Notre Dame, but that's a private university. I found out I was undocumented when I was in 11th grade in high school, and it didn't really matter to me until my senior year came around when I had to apply for college. I was going to apply for Notre Dame, and they basically said, come back when you have a social security number, because being undocumented, we aren't able to apply for private universities. So my dreams are basically shattered. I didn't really think about going to college anymore because, you're told this whole time from middle school up until high school that if you try hard enough and you have good grades and you're involved, you'll be able to go to college, right, to one of your dreams. But that didn't turn out that way. I kind of lost interest my senior year. I had a really good GPA. I graduated in the top 10. But I was fortunate enough to have a high school counselor who told me that even though I was undocumented, I still had the option of going to a CSU or to a UC. And he guided me in picking a perfect CSU and picking a perfect UC, and I applied to very different ones, but I chose CI because I saw that there wasn't much talk about undocumented students here, and I wanted to go to a university where I can open that up to other students, so I chose CI. Being here, it was really difficult when I got here my freshman year because there wasn't a lot of resources for undocumented students, and if there was, it wasn't known about. I actually came here. I'm an EOP student, so I was grateful enough to be accepted into the program, and it has been a big help with the support that they give me. But even then, my second semester being a freshman, I ran out of money, out of my scholarship money. I wasn't able to work legally. DACA hadn't come in place yet, so I wasn't able to work legally, so I was just living off financial aid and my scholarships. But I ran out of money, and I didn't feel comfortable enough on the campus to tell anybody about my situation, so I actually ended up being homeless for about a week and a half until I decided, that it was time that I seek out help. So I talked to my EOP counselor, and I told her about my situation, and she referred me to Professor Jose Alamillo. And after I started talking to Jose Alamillo, he started giving me the resources that are on campus that a lot of undocumented students don't know about. So he was able to help me get extra scholarships. He was able to help me apply for DACA. And once I applied for DACA, I was able to work in the country legally. So then I started working here at the university in the library, and that has been a big help. But it has always been a challenge to find the resources for undocumented students on our campus, because you have to kind of dig, and you have to ask the right people, and you have to ask the right questions, and you have to be very determined. So one of my biggest challenges being an undocumented student is just not being afraid to talk to our administrators and to our faculty and staff about being undocumented and needing the resources.
Miriam, can you kind of talk about your experience applying to college and what your challenges were throughout that process, and then here at campus as well?
So I applied for scholarships, and my counselor also helped me in high school when I was as a junior. She told me that there were scholarships that I could apply for so I could continue my education. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to continue. And I didn't want to apply for colleges and get my highs up and not be able to attend. So I first attended a community college for 2 years with the scholarship that I got, which paid for my tuition and my books, and then I decided to transfer over here after that. But I was very fortunate because throughout my whole process in high school and college, I had advisors and counselors that helped me out with scholarships and resources that I was able to look for and continue with my education throughout college.
So for both of you, just a little bit more, is the process the same as far as filling out the application? Are there additional forms that you need to fill out? Can you talk about a little bit like what that application is like, that process of applying to actual college?
Either one.
The process is a little bit different. I think the bigger difference is that undocumented students cannot apply for financial aid. So for FAFSA, we have to do what is called the DREAM Act, as Monica explained earlier. It's a legislation that gives undocumented students in-state tuition. So we're allowed to receive Cal grants, but we're not allowed to receive any of the federal loans. We just can't have the federal money. We can have state-funded money. So that was one of the biggest differences and challenges, because in high school there's a big lack of resources for undocumented students. So I didn't even know that the DREAM Act was out there, or that it was financial aid for undocumented students, and I actually had to go like 2 hours out of my city to go to a training where they showed me how to apply for the DREAM Act, and they showed me all the papers that I needed. So that was one of the biggest differences. And then applying for colleges, there's certain universities that have extra forms. They're out-of-state tuition forms that you have to fill out. You have to fill out a residency questionnaire, and that only depends on the college you apply to. But it being CI, I had to do my residence questionnaire, I had to do my in-state tuition forms, and then I had to do the DREAM Act. Other than that, the process is pretty much the same. You use the same website, you apply for the college the same way that a legal student would, and you do a statement of purpose. Everything is almost the same except for the extra forms that you have to do.
Did you want to add anything?
Thank you. Erica, what are your goals after college, and how do you plan on achieving that?
So after being an undergrad, I plan to go to grad school. I'm looking into UC Davis into law school for immigration. So what I want to do later on is work for an organization for undocumented people, not just undocumented students, but the undocumented community in general. Right now, I currently have an internship with CHIRLA, which is the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights in Los Angeles. And what I'm doing right now is basically I'm a youth organizer for undocumented students, and we're working on passing legislation in Congress to be able to help undocumented students. Right now, we're working on the Dreamers Resource Center bill to get resource centers for undocumented students on all our college campuses. So I would love to be an immigration lawyer for that organization since it has done so much for me, and I feel that I need to give back to my community as an undocumented student who is now able to work in the country legally.
Can you talk about the same as far as your career aspirations and how do you plan achieving that?
So my goal is to be an elementary teacher. I'm planning to work in a community school, and I preferably want to work with immigrant children as well, because I know the struggle and what they will go through and all the questions that they might have. So I want to give back to my community with that, or if I can be an elementary teacher, I want to be a counselor, an advisor, so they could so I could also give them advice on what to do and how to work to get a higher education.
All right, thank you once again to the panelists for sharing your experience. Let's give it up to them. So before moving on to the Q&A portion, we would like to read a written statement by Anaí Quiros, who was unable to be here today. Anaí is an alumni here at CI who graduated in 2011. She studied social inequalities in our sociology department. She is also a first-generation immigrant who has crossed the border without documentation twice, once at the age of 6 and another time at the age of 17. This has allowed her to fully understand the immigration journey and has engaged in local groups, such as Dreamers Without Borders. Today, she works as a CSR executive for Registry Monitoring Insurance Services in Westlake Village, and so Chantel's going to go ahead and read her statement for us.
A couple of years ago, I heard a Border Patrol express his frustration with finding children crossing the border without documents. She states, "Here is a 6-year-old kid who doesn't know anything about life. His parents make that decision to bring him to the United States, place them in the hands of some person who they don't know, some person who will get drunk, use drugs, smuggle dope, and that is the person that they choose to give their child to. They shouldn't be surprised if their kid never makes it. Last year, we had thousands of unaccompanied minors coming from Central America to cross the U.S. borders. This year, we asked, why is running towards the water safer than staying in your homeland? These stories remind me that when I was 6 years old, I was in a similar dangerous position. The difference was that I threw a tantrum on my mother and I said, I'm not going with that stranger. Hearing these stories make me think about how dangerous and vulnerable it had been for me to be in the hands of a smuggler. Anything could have happened to me because the same violent criminal organizations run both human and drug smuggling. Because of my tantrum, my mom took me with her while she walked across the desert. In those first 3 years in Conejo Val Elementary School, I learned about the American dream and what it meant to be American. At the center of that idea is that I could be whoever I wanted to be if I worked really hard. But then in 1994, my mom got sick. She was pregnant at the time and was diagnosed with meningitis 3 days after delivering my brother. This changed our family forever. My mom could no longer be the hardworking woman she had always been. So my grandmother and I went back to Mexico, where I continued my education. By the time I was 17, I felt like there was no opportunities available for me in Mexico. My grandmother passed away, and I had been out of school for a year. I was planning on working full-time and supporting myself. Fortunately, my mom was able to pay a coyote and cross me over. Before I returned to the U.S., I spent an entire month saying goodbye to family, friends, and all of the wonderful sights that exhibits in Mexico City. We didn't know when or if we were going to ever see each other again. I knew deep in my heart that once I crossed the border to El Norte, Once I was in, there would be no way back. My first encounter with my mom after 8 years of separation was cold. The smuggler was going to turn me into my mom in a gas station. He said, "No expressions of emotion when you get out of the car." When we got home, we embraced, but we had been apart for way too long. I didn't feel as if she were my mother. It just didn't feel that motherly love that everybody told me I was going to have. I was almost an adult, and because my mom could not work anymore, I became the head of the household at 17. Nobody asked me to, I just did what I felt I had to do. I began working 2 jobs while attending Thousand Oaks High School. I finished my high school education when I was 20, but I did not know what to do after graduation. I had no money, no papers, and no family members that could help me out. However, I knew what I didn't want to. I knew I didn't want to get pregnant, get into drugs, or get into trouble with the law. My friends, who were some of the best students in our graduating class, pointed out to me that because of my grades and my involvement in school and the community, I could be competitive enough to get accepted into a 4-year university. So I applied to 9 different universities, and I chose to attend Channel Islands because it was the closest university to Ventura County. So with $6,000 in scholarships, hard work in 2 different restaurants, commuting twice a week, and having 4 to 5 classes a day for most of my undergrad, I completed my bachelor's degree in sociology and minors in political science and Spanish in 5 years and only had $1,000 in debt. It was difficult and there were many challenges, but it never ever crossed my mind to leave school. I'm a Mexican immigrant who migrated to this country in order to have a better life. It has taken me 11 years to get to the point where I can finally feel that I made it. It feels as if I have been out of the blue when President Obama announced deferred action for child arrivals. In his speech, he said, eligible individuals will be able to request temporary relief from deportation proceedings and apply for a work authorization. Now let's be clear, this is not amnesty, this is not immunity, this is not a path to citizenship, it is not a permanent fix. This is temporary stopgap measure that lets us focus on resources wisely while giving a degree of relief and hope to talented, driven, patriotic young people. It is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do because I've been in groups of young people who work so hard and speak with so much heart about what's best in America, even though I knew some of them must have lived under the fear of deportation. And I've seen stories of Americans in schools, churches, and communities across the country who stood up for them and rallied behind them and pushed them to give a better path of freedom from fear. Because we are a better nation that one expels innocent young kids. Young people who are going to make extraordinary contributions and already making contributions to our society. For years, we lived as outsiders, restricted with access to basic resources and institutions most Americans deem essential to survive and success. For years, we've had no other choice than to work and go to school in a cash-based environment. For years, we lived a life of hiding, living in constant state of fear, and being discovered and deported to origins of other countries. This was and still is the reality of thousands of other immigrants just like us. My life changed dramatically after getting my work permit. Now I was free to knock on any door that I could have dreamed of. My income has almost doubled. I have a full-time job with benefits. At this point, I have exceeded my dreams that my mother had had for me. I can say with confidence that every struggle was worth it. I would like to ask you, please get rid of the word illegal immigrant because no human being is illegal. Someday I will be a lawyer because I intend to make a difference in this world, to give the voice to others who lost theirs, to speak up when others do not have the courage. Go in peace, follow your dreams, and remember that the only shame is betraying your ideas and failing to stand for your beliefs. Also, stay true to yourself. Remember, if you look at something as it is, then it will only get worse. But if you look at something as it is and what it could be, then ultimately it will. And I promise you that it will turn out as it should. Thank you.
So as I mentioned before, unfortunately, Anaí could not be here with us today, but I'm grateful that she still provided us with a very powerful statement of her life experience. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of today's program. Before we get started, we would like to go over some ground rules that we fully expect all of you to abide by. and this is to help ensure that we provide a safe space for everyone to share their opinions, questions, and concerns respectfully. During this question and answer time, please observe the following ground rules, which will also be posted here behind us. First being, do not interrupt when someone else is speaking.
If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and wait until we call on you.
Please phrase your comments in the form of a question to the panelists and not to each other.
We understand that the subject is very passionate and some people may be very passionate, but please do not raise your voice when speaking. We will have a microphone available and we'll give that to you.
Please be sure to address the statement and not the person.
Please be constructive in what you say.
Consider the other people's viewpoints, where they are coming from, and most importantly, what they may be feeling.
And lastly, please note in the interest of time that we as moderators will keep the discussion moving forward and will redirect the discussion as needed.
Right, so with that being said, anybody have any questions?
Hello. Thank you for speaking today. I just had a question. As a person who was born here, I'm privileged to be able to openly protest without, fear of government punishment or any kind of thing like that coming up. I just wanted to know, how is it that an undocumented migrant is able to protest? What kind of fears do you have? What kind of punishments are there for any kind of open protest where one would then disclose their undocumented status?
There's always the fear of, getting in trouble and for doing that or protesting and getting deported. So I always try not to get in trouble, so not to protest in a way that makes my image, that damage my image and damage the people that are undocumented as well.
Okay, so I just want to share a story with you to kind of build off your question. Not too long ago, Donald Trump was here doing, the debates. I think it was in Simi Valley. And being a youth organizer for Chirla, they have taught me skills on how to protest peacefully and how to do it in the correct way so that we don't get in trouble. As far as it goes, as stating that you're undocumented to the public, and when there's authorities, as far as the police or border patrol, it's something that you as a dreamer, you decide on your own. As an undocumented student who has worked for an organization like Chirla, I've learned to lose the fear of saying that I'm undocumented because I'm protected under DACA. But there's a lot of undocumented students who don't have that same protection of not being able to be deported. Before I was documented, I never said that I was undocumented. I wouldn't even be sitting on this panel telling everybody here that I'm undocumented because of the fear of deportation. But that day in the protest, I stated that I was undocumented. I had a poster that said I was undocumented, unafraid, and for my immigrant community. And all you have to do when it comes to protesting is make sure that you're doing it in a respectful way and that you understand that people have different political views. And you need to learn how to just appreciate, that people have different views, because if we would all be the same, this would be a boring world, right? So I think as far as protesting, it's really your own fear and it's your decision as a person to be able to say that you're documented or not. There was people who were anti-immigrant on the other side of the street who were yelling at us to go back to our country, that we come to take your benefits away and that we just come and take jobs, that we're rapists, that we just were smugglers of drugs. But we didn't respond to those kind of attacks because we know that that's not what we are. We know that we're here to work for the country. And there was another group of undocumented people who weren't part of our organization, and they responded in a violent way. They started yelling back at them and they were throwing things at them. So it just goes to show the differences of your background as far as being an organizer for the community and as far as having an education to our immigrant community who unfortunately wasn't exposed to those kinds of things.
May 1st, 2006, big event for 8540. Can I get your experience about that?
May 1st, 2006.
The march for the AB 540 students about the DREAM Act. can I get your reaction about that and that kind of sense? Like, do you guys remember what happened back then?
No, can you remind us a little bit about what happened?
Back then, I guess there was a lot of marches. Kids were getting out of schools because it was protested against the act that there was going to be deportations for AB 540 students, and it was a huge breakthrough. And I think people have forgotten about that. Back in May 1st, 2006, at such a historical event, there was marches from LA to San Francisco. People protested to get the bill removed for AB 540 students to be deported.
Okay, so back in 2006, I was still not aware that I was undocumented, so I don't really recall, seeing that on the news or even being a part of it or anything like that. But I have read a lot about it in undocumented books and in articles, etc. I feel like a lot of the times when people protest against immigration, against undocumented students in general, it's just the lack of information. A lot of people, there's myths that we come to this country, that we don't pay taxes, that we take the jobs away, or what Donald Trump said, saying that we're rapists and we're drug smugglers and things like that. And as an undocumented student and as allies like Monica Riva herself, she does things that help our community to inform them about undocumented students, about the truth about undocumented students, the truth about immigrants in our country. So I think, a lot of the protests had to do with the lack of resources, and it's very saddening to know that there's people out there who think we come to harm the country when it's totally the opposite. So one of the major things that we're trying to do here on the CI community, is to make it a discussion that people can talk about so that things like that don't happen on our campus, so that our undocumented students that are on our campus don't feel like it's not safe and don't feel like, people don't want them here, or like they're gonna get deported. So that's the whole purpose of having this kind of talks with the community, and it's something uncomfortable to talk about, and it's uncomfortable to say that you're undocumented. But if people like us don't take the initiative to do that, then nobody's gonna ever be able to change those perspectives.
So I know you mentioned a couple times already about the comment that Donald Trump specifically has made in regards to the immigrant population. Can you guys kind of talk about what it feels like to be called an immigrant, to be called illegal, to be called an alien, or to hear somebody talk about you and your community in that way? Can you kind of just share your experience with dealing with all of that?
Well, for me, it kind of affects me because it wasn't really my choice to come over here and be illegal. If I had a choice to do it everything the way the laws make it and everything, then I would have done it and I would have been perfectly fine. So now there's a point where it doesn't really matter what they think, as long as I know that I'm here for a purpose. I have a dream to have a career, to be someone in life, to help out my community. I think those are just comments that doesn't really matter when it comes to my decisions and what I want to do.
When I first heard Donald Trump saying these things, as an undocumented student, the first thing was, what's his problem? It was a big sense of anger and frustration that a man who has an education and who has a bigger perspective of the world, who had first-hand resources, would say something like that about my immigrant community. But once I started to protest and I started to realize, like I said earlier, that everybody has different political perspectives, I began to understand that the only thing that I can do in my position as an undocumented student is change the way that he thinks. And by doing that, you have to think strategically. You have to say, okay, well, what's the way that I can get to him? What's the way that I could change the way that he's thinking? So in that is when we decided as an organization, to go in and protest and to go and inform ourselves. And all you can do in these situations, is try to get to this person and educate them and what's happening. And that's the same thing that you see here on our CI community. even though it's not talked about, like the undocumented students, what we have done as undocumented students here is to inform faculty, staff, and administrators on what are the struggles on our campuses and what is it that you can do in your position to help us, which is why we have been lucky enough to have the AB 540 training that Monica Rivas has helped us to continue every year. So all you can do as an undocumented student, you know, when you hear those kind of things, is how can I change that? But how can I change that in a strategical manner that's gonna get to them, you know? And in order to do that, you have to be an educated person, and you have to, you know, have an open mind about both sides of why this person thinks this way, and just be respectful to their political views.
I wanted to ask you about DACA and some of the concerns about it. Since it was not a law that was voted on by Congress, the future president, with a stroke of the pen, could repeal it. So, what's some of the concern that for a future administration, the federal government could then turn around and have access to all the information of undocumented students that received help through DACA?
Well, in regards to, all students on all campuses are protected by FERPA, so that's not something that, our university can go around and turn around and distribute student information. So those kinds of student records are protected.
Can I just add something to that? As somebody who is documented, that has been a very big stressor right now currently in my education, knowing that presidential elections are coming up and that debates are happening. A lot of the candidates want to take DACA away, and what DACA is, it gives certain undocumented students an opportunity to work in the country legally and have a social security, and they're protected from deportation for the 2 years. And it's a big concern to know that once President Obama is out, that it can be something that's taken away. So right now I'm able to work in the country legally, and I'm able to obtain my education, but it's like hanging off a cliff and not knowing what's going to happen to you next, and knowing that I should be graduating next year, and that there's a huge possibility that I won't be able to work in my field or even go to law school. It's something that plays a big stress on undocumented students, and it's something that, like I said, in our CI community, it's not talked about a lot, but we're fortunate enough to be working with Dr. Rockland and Counseling Services, who is helping us with this kind of stressors that play a role in our education.
Erica, thank you for sharing your story. You mentioned you chose CI to shed light on an issue that impacts the community as a whole. Other than the few professors that seek to inform and support undocumented students, do you feel the CI institution supports you as well? If not, what have you done to demand support, or what will you do since this is an HSI institution?
We're very fortunate to be able to, I had the opportunity my freshman year when I was struggling as an undocumented student to create a student organization for undocumented students, which is the Channel Islands Dreamers. Other than that, we have the AB 540 training, which happens every year, and that faculty and staff and administrators and even allies and students are invited to. As far as the institution and what is it that the institution does to support us and what can they do, I feel like the reason why we have a lack of support from the institution is the lack of information that is given to this administrators, right? So like I was stating earlier, in order to make a change, you need to be the person that goes and that educates these people, because although we have administrators, who have PhDs and have master's degrees and all this other things, they haven't been exposed to working with undocumented students. And undocumented students is a fairly new topic, and every day there's legislations that are passing that help undocumented students. So we can't expect them to be getting updates from this, when they have other populations that they have worked longer terms with. So what we have been pushing for is a resource center on our campus for undocumented students, specified for undocumented students. They mentioned earlier that we have programs like EOP, like SSS, which help undocumented students, but the reality is that even programs like these, they don't meet the necessities that undocumented students have as far as legal concerns, as far as counseling services. So we, as undocumented students, there has been a few of us who have actually met with the Dean of Student Life, with Dean Peña, and we have expressed to him our concerns about putting a resource center, and he has worked with us, and we have been having meetings with him to be able to make this a reality. But on top of that, we're also working on the legislation side. Like I said, the organization that I work for, we work on the resource center bill for undocumented students so that we can have this resource centers as a mandatory thing for our CSUs and our UCs. So as far as support from the institution, what we would like to see as undocumented students is a resource center for undocumented students that meets all the requirements, because although we are thankful for EOP and for SSS, there is a lot of resources that need a different kind of training and a different perspective.
What happens in the sub? What happens in classrooms? What are the things that by not being conscious of issues, not having them at the forefront, that we could be doing better?
What things can we as a CI community do better, like whether in the sub, in the classrooms, like more than just the programs that are offered to you, and kind of everyday daily life, like in college, what are some things that we can do to, not assuming everybody's eligible for HSI funding, what are some of the things that we can do as a community, as individuals within a community?
So one thing that, would be, some of it is just people, just not being aware, like making, certain kind of statements because they just don't know that some students might not have the capability, the means, the resources to even do certain assignments, let's just say, for example. So one thing that I know some of us want to do is, try to have as many faculty and as many staff members who work on campus to do the training. And so we're trying to get, the student administration to hopefully agree that that's something that should happen for as many faculty and staff as possible. So as an ally, that's something that, I want to make sure to try to see that, we can make happen.
Yeah, I think it's important to educate, not everyone, but like at least a lot of people, so they could know what they could do and help themselves if they're undocumented students, as well as if they know someone, help them out as well.
As the CI community, I think one of the biggest things that we need to work on is our freshman population. So coming to CI and coming to orientation, during the FAFSA presentation, they gave a small portion about the DREAM Act as well, and what is it that you can do as an undocumented student and the resources that are available to you here. But I think we need to focus and make a bigger portion of orientation aimed towards our undocumented students. And I know that it's a very difficult topic to kind of specialize on because of the fact that it has to do with something bigger, with something that has to do with being legal or illegal. And when it comes to that, these freshmen come to our campus without much support, from their high schools as what it means to be undocumented and what are the challenges that you're going to face being undocumented while you're in college. So what I would like to see from our CI community is see a bigger portion or have more specified workshops for undocumented students to let them know that here at CI we support undocumented students and we work with undocumented students in providing resources. So that's what I would like to see in our CI community.
Thanks for speaking to us today. I have two questions that are kind of related. I noticed in the context of protesting, you mentioned that there are certain actions that aren't really open to you as an undocumented student, and that kind of feeds into the whole idea of the model minority, where you may be held to a higher standard of behavior than somebody who is documented. I'm wondering if that, if you've experienced that, if there's, if that pressure has affected you in other aspects of your life. And the second question is, again, in the context of protest, those of us who are documented we have the privilege of protesting or taking action that's maybe a little bit, not violent, but a little bit more aggressive, without the fear of being deported. And there are peaceful protests that aren't violent, but you can get arrested for sit-ins and the like. Do you think that those of us who have that option available to us should exercise it? Is it constructive? Is there a place in the movement for it? I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on what we can do. Those of us who have the privilege of taking action and not facing the risk of being deported. Thank you.
So as far as protesting again, like I mentioned earlier, it's something that you as an undocumented student have to choose if you want to state that you're undocumented or not. I feel like before I was unafraid of stating that I was documented, I limited myself a lot to what I could do. So instead of being out in the streets and actually protesting with a banner or anything, I would just go, to the meetings, and I would help in creating posters, and I would help in creating the speeches that they would be delivering to the media. But I wouldn't put myself in the situation where I knew that I could get arrested and potentially be deported. But now that I am fortunate enough to be documented and to have protection from deportation, I lost that fear, and I go and I protest and I hold my banner, and I speak to the media. So I think it goes back to how comfortable do you feel stating that you're undocumented? How comfortable do you feel, risking a lot, risking what your parents did for you and bringing you to the country, risking your education or everything that you have, basically. Answering your second question, can you ask the question again? If those of us who are documented and don't face the risk of being deported, is it constructive for us to protest in a way that is a little bit more aggressive and kind of use that privilege that we have kind of for good, or is it not constructive? Does it hurt the dialogue? I would be interested in your opinion. So here,
basically, protesting, good or bad.
So here on the CI community, as I mentioned, we have the Channel Islands Dreamers Club. Our club is mostly composed of allies, the not undocumented students. Because the issue isn't discussed so much, I feel like a lot of undocumented students on our campus are afraid to come out and are afraid to state that. So our movement consists more of allies than anything else. As far as the community, I'm a part of Dreamers Without Borders, which is an organization here in Oxnard for undocumented students. And in the movement, I think what has made it possible, to have all these different legislations passing is the support that we have from our community. And that goes for our documented community as well, because like you mentioned, they're not at much risk as undocumented people would be. So yes, it's very constructive that you as a citizen, as a resident, or any legal status that you might have, that you support your undocumented community, because at the end of the day, the undocumented community makes a big proportion, of our economy. The reason why the economy in the U.S. is flourishing so much, it's because of the immigration that we have day to day coming. So I think it's very constructive, and it's very important that we have allies who are documented in the movement. And you see it everywhere in every organization for undocumented students. Most of it is composed of allies. So I encourage you to protest, to help in other way that you can, and to join our club so that you can help us here on the CI community, because we have to start in our community before we can make a bigger change.
Being allies is really important, right? And so most of us here are maybe not undocumented, but we know neighbors, friends, family members, people that we know that are undocumented. So it's very important for us to be allies and to offer our support, because we do wield that privilege, right? So if there's any opportunities to put that, to help a bit, right? Just attending this event, attending protests, any sorts of demonstrations that raise awareness on the issue of people suffering, right? So it's important for us to be politicized too, and to help, raise awareness about people's situations and the difficulties that they face. On the in terms of the everyday things that we can do to support our friends and our neighbors and family members that are undocumented is to not use dehumanizing language, right? So in the classroom, in the newspaper, right, there's been a lot of critique in terms of these words like illegal, right? Like that they're very dehumanizing words, right? Nobody is an illegal unless you're like ET, an extraterrestrial, right? Or an alien, right? So don't use those words. Don't use the word alien. Don't use the word illegal. They're very dehumanizing and they hurt people that are just trying to make a living here and contribute to this society. So check your language, right? Everyday things like. Also, this is a university that seeks to give you multicultural perspectives, right? So whenever possible, like if you feel that your professor, your instructor in class is not addressing the particular experiences of undocumented youth, you know, just kindly tell them like, hey, is there any way we could talk about these issues as well? Because I feel that they haven't been addressed in our class. So you can talk to your professors no matter what discipline you're in or what major you're in, so that they can include these kinds of perspectives, because this university seeks to, advance those kinds of perspectives and to enable you to empathize with other peoples, right, of the world and your communities here. So those are the everyday things that we can do. And I just wanted to thank you for being, brave and for sharing your stories. And if you can talk about what you plan to do next, right, in terms of activism, in terms of graduate school, or you said you wanted to be a lawyer, but what are your ultimate dreams, and how can we, as faculty and staff, help you make those dreams a reality? Thank you.
That's a very overwhelming question right now. Like I mentioned earlier, regarding being documented, I don't know if I'll be able to work in the country legally next year, so I'm limiting myself a lot to what I want to do in the future, because I don't want to put my hopes high up, like Miriam was saying earlier regarding school, Ultimately, what I want to do is become an immigration lawyer and help my immigrant community, but I plan to be a Chicano Studies professor in a university where awareness of the undocumented community is needed. I want to work in a high school to be able to, build that bridge that you need from the transition from high school to a university, so that we have more undocumented students going to a four-year university. Those are my future plans. In terms of activism here on the CI community, we will be having the club again next semester. Unfortunately, this semester our executive board is going to be graduating for the most part, so we took the time off. But next semester, I really hope that with events like this one that bring awareness about the undocumented community, that we have more undocumented students on our campus that feel comfortable, even if they don't say that they're undocumented, but being comfortable enough to come to our club meetings and to know that they have a safe space. And what we're going to focus for the most part on next semester is working with our own university and working with legislation in order to pass the bill to have Dreamers Resource Centers on our campus, because I think it's really important. If you look around us, universities like Cal State Fullerton, Cal State Long Beach, they have all opened up resource centers for undocumented students. We have UC Davis, we have UCLA, we have a variety of universities, and the question that we have to ask ourselves as the CI community is, what can we do to have a resource center for undocumented students on our campus? And not just talk about it, but be about it, take an action and go talk to our Dean of Student Life, go talk to President Rush, go talk to Dr. Sawyer, go talk to people who have the power to make that change. And as you can see, if you look around the room right now, we have people here who have the power to make that change. And if they're here, it's because they're willing to work with us, right? So let's hold our administrators, our faculty and staff accountable of their actions, and follow up with them, and not just, hear from them, oh, I support you and I hope that we can make a change. But make sure that you follow up and say, well, what have you done so far? Just like we do with our AB 540 training, what we want to work harder on is going to these people who have the
the AB 540 key and telling them, okay, well, what have you done since you got trained till this day? So what we're going to be working on is holding faculty, staff, and administrators accountable of having their AB 540 key and working on getting a Dreamers Resource Center on our campus.
You want to add anything, Maria?
Well, same as Erica, I don't know what's gonna happen next. But the same thing, I'm hoping I'm able to work on what I'm studying for, which is an elementary teacher, and get back to my community and work with the students that need better education.
You have another question from the student?
So I have two questions. The first question is based on the fact that you talked about being afraid or being scared about deportation, about going back to Mexico, because it's not, I guess, the best lifestyle down there. I didn't grow up down there, so I don't know. However, I do know that this country has laws and policies in place for refugees. So the first question is, unfortunately, with the last thing that just happened in Paris, the bombing on Friday, a couple of those bombers were Syrian refugees that the French nationalists left their country legally. So why haven't the countrymen as a whole come together to apply for a refugee status in the United States? That's my first question. Two, you talked about working in the United States. I've looked up how terrible the dollar figure is. It's approximately $200 for a illegal to get the rights to work in this country. $200 is a hefty dollar amount for anybody to pay, regardless if you're a citizen of the country in the first case. So have you thought about dropping that work visa or student visa dollar amount down from the State Department so that it's easier for everyone to be documented to come over, so you don't have the fear of deportation? So there's enough fear in the first place, and changing the political side of it and changing the state economy on the subject instead of just talking about it. Yeah. So the first question was refugee status in general. The second question was dropping the price at which it costs to get a visa to do anything in the country legally.
So legislation and qualifications to, the criteria to qualify for refugee status are all very political. They're driven by the legislature. I know back in 2004, it seemed like the United States federal government was about to pass the DREAMers Act, and it got bogged down. It passed in one house of Congress and not the other. And so currently, under current laws and legislation, most people across the border from Mexico and Central America will not qualify for refugee status, regardless of how war-torn their neighborhood is, regardless of the violence they've seen, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not possible. But I also, in saying that, I also want to remind people that AB 540 students and Dreamer students do not just come from Mexico and Central America, and many of them have the same sort of white skin I do, and overstayed tourist visas. They come from different countries around the world, so let's be careful about equating one thing with the other falsely. The second question was about, so again, that's a federal policy that I would be surprised if our students were actively working on that or working on many other things, but from their response, I guess they're not actively working on the federal policy and the minutiae of the DACA Act.
I'd just like to add to that the way to affect change is to become involved in the political process for those of us who are not at risk, and maybe for some of us who are at risk. And so to change that dollar amount, to change the definition of refugee status, it takes all of us to lobby our representatives in the right Congress to show up at political events and voice our concerns about those issues.
I hope that helps some.
Hi guys, my name is Andrea. I was illegal until I was about 10 years old, so I went through this whole process. And to answer his question, Mexican immigrants that arrive to the United States as children don't have that option, period, because our way to legalize is very set in stone. There's a certain path you have to take. My mother and I applied, and in total it was about $15,000 to $20,000 to finish legally. We jumped through hoops. I was here since I was 1 year old, so I grew up in the United States, and deportation was a very, very likely event. Our lawyers told us to be prepared for that and stuff like that, but we got a judge that kind of, saw that I was American basically and waived the deportation order. So I guess to answer his question is that the hoops that we have to jump through, even now, if you're a Mexican person applying for permanent residency, you get punished with 10 years in your native country automatically. There's no debate in that. So applying for refugee status or lowering the prices or whatever is something you don't even have the option until you jump through those hurdles, which is tens of twenties of thousands of dollars, especially for my mom and I, which we were two people. She was working in the field, she was working in kitchens and stuff like that. We scraped, my entire family contributed, and we got our legalization. And also to start the process, one of your family members has to be legal in the United States. So if none of your family is legalized, you don't even have a foot through the door.
Can I just add to the question? Sorry about that. I want to use your question as an example of why is it important that we have allies in the undocumented movement. Being an undocumented student, what you focus on in the movement is the bigger picture as an undocumented student, as far as resources for undocumented students, legislations that will help us immediately. Your question is something that I think as an undocumented student and many of us, we haven't thought about that because we don't have that American perspective or that legal perspective. So this just goes to show why it's important that we have allies in the movement so that we can shine the light on questions like the one that you just asked, because unfortunately that's something that I hadn't thought about before, but it makes a lot of sense that as undocumented students we would be working towards making a change in what you asked us. So I just want to tell everybody that this is why it's important that we have U.S. citizens, residents, and Americans working with us as well so that we solve other issues that we don't see in our everyday lives.
What are your experiences with CI students, and what have your experiences been, positive or negative, and how can we better, be an ally for undocumented students?
So I think this question is more specific to CI students here and what has been kind of like their attitude and actions towards undocumented students from your experience.
So I haven't really been exposed because this is like the first time I actually open up to people that I'm undocumented. So I don't really have a lot of experience with that other than my friends that I told them and stuff. But probably Erica has.
I think my experience as an undocumented student, it has been on different levels, on different scales, depending on the kind of environment I'm in. So when it comes to being in an environment like my Chicano study classes, talking about immigration is something that we do very often. And in classes like that, a lot of the time students don't use dehumanizing terms, but when it comes to different classes, as far as, for example, I had an English class in which I spoke about being undocumented and I wrote an essay about it, and a lot of the reactions from students were like, what the, like, this is a thing, we have students on our campus who are undocumented that face these challenges, why didn't I know about it? So a lot of the reactions that I receive from students in general is they're just surprised, they're shocked that we have people who are going through this kind of struggles every day. I have been in some situations that are very dehumanizing where people use terms such as illegal or alien, and that's something that as a human being, as an immigrant in general, I react to very quickly and I respond very quickly, and it's not in a positive way, which I have learned to control over the years of my education. But now when people use the term illegal or alien, I just kind of like sit there like, hold on, what did you just say? Like, but like everybody's saying, it's the lack of education and the lack of proper resources that our CI community receives, and I just hope that when you walk away from this event that you take with you the lesson of not using dehumanizing terms, because hearing the word illegal and hearing the word alien, it brings back a lot of traumatizing moments that students, undocumented students face throughout elementary, middle school, and high school when, as far as bullying. A lot of the times, in our K through 12 education, we're bullied a lot for being immigrants. So just take into concern that the students have been through very traumatizing moments from the moment they cross the border through their K through 12 education, and that's something that we don't want to encourage here on our CA community. So just watch using the word illegal and alien. They're very dehumanizing terms that shouldn't be in our vocabulary.
Are there any other questions? We have a few.
I was just wondering for students that after listening to this, maybe it's their first experience being exposed, what can they do to support you and Dreamers on campus besides being on the club, or how can they reach out to the club? So just saying that it's not active this semester. If they want to continue next semester, what will we do?
If you are interested in making a difference in the CI community or in the immigrant community in general, I highly recommend that you like our page on Facebook, which is the Channel Islands Dreamers, and send us a message there. That way we'll be able to communicate to you as far as when we will be meeting. And in the meanwhile, since we don't have the club active on campus, we work closely with the organization in the Oxnard community, which is the Dreamers Without Borders. We meet every Wednesday at 6 p.m. and if you could talk to me after the event, I can give you the directions to get to that location. So as far as students being involved, even though we're not on this semester, I know a lot of you commute, so being involved with your Oxnard community meanwhile would be one of the biggest things that you can do as an ally, and from there we can talk about what kind of actions you can take.
Monica, do you want to talk about more on the perspective of, I guess, admin, staff or faculty in regards to what they can do to help students feel supported on campus?
So I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, and I think like if they haven't already attended, the training that we have specifically for staff and faculty to learn more about, some of the issues that come up for students, and just so that we know, like, well, how can we help them? What are some resources? So I think that is definitely a start, and anybody who's interested, like there is, an ongoing task force to different things. I know another thing that I forgot to mention is that, you guys, it's right now with space, that the resource center is, a little bit challenging, but I know one thing that we are working on is trying to have an online website where there's like a specific location where we can look at whatever resources are available to students. So that is something that, we are working on, those of us who are on the task force for AB 540 students. But again, like the most important thing is just kind of sometimes just being aware and careful of potential advice you might give a student. Like, don't tell a student you need to quit your job if you want to get good grades, or because for some people that's not a possibility. So you kind of have to be open to look at the students from their perspective, try to empathize and not give people your opinions of what you think they should be doing. So take a moment to listen to them, to try to figure out what is going on, how can you help them get to the goals that they want to get to. For the most part, students, as Erika and Miriam explained, like a lot of time that's not like a subject of conversation that just comes up casually. So, when I did have, when students did come out because they saw like, okay, what is this AB 540 key you have? Like, what does that mean? And so I did discover that there were actually at least a dozen students and they all kind of stick together, but unfortunately not feeling safe. That's not something, they just kind of wanted to come to school, do their thing, and not get into trouble, not be in the spotlight. So that's the thing that I think for those of us that are allies and want to help the students, we want those students to reach out and ask for help, and know that there is a community here to help them. So as far as statistics, I can't tell you, specific statistics of the breakdown of all the different groups, but they're definitely, even like Canada, there's a lot of Canadians too, where, they take advantage of UB 540 in order to pay in-state tuition. So again, we just kind of have to make people aware that not just to think Mexico, that, there are a lot of different people who utilize that legislation. Thank you. So we have a VA.
Hi everyone, I know the program's probably ending soon, but I did want to make a point of clarification. The programs in the Division of Student Affairs and Student Life are definitely advocates and support our Dreamer students. That goes without saying, I hope you all know that. But I would like to clarify that Student Support Services is a federally funded program on this campus and unfortunately cannot serve our Dreamer students. But they are there as a resource. If a student still wants to come by the SSS Center, the students and the staff are well educated about the resources that are available for our students on campus.
Thank you for that clarification. Dr. Sawyer, you want to add something?
First of all, I want to applaud the panelists and our students for being so brave. One of the things that I also wanted to mention, because we talked about legislation, I think that's absolutely key. So I happen to be a gubernatorial appointed member of what's called the California Student Aid Commission. It's a 15-person board. The reason why that's key is because that's the money that oftentimes then legislatively, there was California grants that were not picked up by students who were considered then as native or domestic students. So once that was passed, that meant that the students who really wanted the money were able to get the money if they were undocumented. And so we're seeing more and more of our students who are undocumented that are asking for the dollars. So I would hope that you would pick these up and find out a little bit more about the Cal grants and what does this mean to you. I do understand that where we are, certainly our 8540 students will look much different than if they would in another part of the United States. But the fact is, as Erica pointed out, as well as Monica, that the key thing is that California is doing this and we are the leader. And right now, other states are asking us then for the exact same legislation that we passed here in California. They're looking for it in other states. So I'm really excited about that. But I want to make sure that those are absolutely necessities for students to be able to go to school. And so for you to be able to continue that dream, make sure that you come and talk to us so we can help you.
Hey, we're running out of time, so Chantel, if you want to go ahead and close this up.
Thank you everyone for participating today. Again, thank you to our panelists. Let's give it up for them. We just want you to know that we appreciate your experiences and sharing them with us all today.